I've talked about Elden Ring several times now, and I admit I have been biased towards the negative. So I want to praise a positive aspect of the game. Indeed, I want to argue that what some could argue is a flaw with the game is actually a stupendous asset, one that makes the entire game click in a way it otherwise wouldn't on a purely mechanical basis. Let me use the character I'm currently playing as a demonstrator. He's in the home stretch. His next obstacle is the fire giant, and he's fresh off killing Melania, the second most bullshit boss in the entire game, with a brick. This is my strength character, and I've tried several things with him: shield poking tank, giant crusher bonk master. We have lightning bolt at home, the falling star beast jaw. We have the blasphemous blade at home, the ruins greatsword. But none have been so fun to me as running around with this fucking brick. I used the brick hammer for a bit in the middle of the game, but I ditched it once I picked up the ruins greatsword, only to eventually go back to it going into the snowfield. Now, why did I do that? The answer is the thing I mean here to praise about this game: the aesthetic. I'm not necessarily, or strictly speaking, talking about the look of the weapon itself, though that certainly can be important. I'm talking about the whole sign that is the weapon. Everything it signifies, its item description, the stats it needs, the moves it can do, everything about how that weapon looks when wielded and what that weapon means to the world diegetically. The brick hammer can be found on the exterior wall of Stormvale, which is appropriate given the size of the brick. It looks as if someone ripped it straight off the castle's wall, drilled a hole through the middle, and stuck a plank of wood through it to make a handle. It is not a purpose-built weapon. No blacksmith crafted it. It is a piece of a building crudely jerry-rigged into a weapon. That crudeness exudes from the weapon just by being on screen. As I said, it's a large brick with a handle. It's the exact opposite of sophisticated. Yet it's also clearly something chosen to become a weapon because of its heft, because of what swinging such a brick into someone would do to them. It's not like the pickaxe. It's not an ordinary work tool wielded as a weapon out of convenience or necessity. It's also not like the large club, which is a large and crudely carved piece of wood used in much the same manner, because a piece of wood is so obviously inferior to a giant brick in terms of effect on whatever you hit with it. It's an object chosen to become a weapon due to the obvious damage it could do if fashioned into one. The brick always had the power to be a devastating weapon. It's inherent to what it is, but it was made for a different purpose and could not exhibit that power until someone picked it up and used it as such. The brick hammer had, to be a memester about it, a hidden power level, and so too does whoever picks it up and starts flinging it around. This is not exactly uncommon among high strength requirement weapons. The game has a habit of noting what weapons are considered too heavy to be wielded by humans, the lower bound being the Zweihande, whose item description literally states it is the heaviest weapon a human can actually use. Beyond that threshold, several item descriptions, such as that for the greatsword, state that they are far, far too heavy for an ordinary human to wield them, implying that whoever can possesses some degree of supernatural power to be able to do so. This is also true for the brick hammer, whose description notes that it is exceptionally heavy, and the strength of a giant is required to wield it. Again, by implication, that means the player's strength must be superhuman, equal to a giant, to be able to pick up and swing the brick hammer around at all, yet you remain the size of an ordinary human, meaning this power would not be obvious at first glance unless you were clearly carrying something a normal person shouldn't be able to, such as the giant crusher. I want to make a point about the giant crusher and why I prefer the brick hammer to it, because it's due to how it plays into that exact hidden power vibe. The giant crusher is comically absurdly huge. A gigantic boulder roughly carved into the shape of a battle hammer. When you walk around with that thing slung over your shoulder, it's very obvious you are not what you seem. Much like it's obvious there's something magical afoot with Radahn's horse, given how tiny it is compared to him. When you charged R2 with it, it's not a surprise. You clearly possess powers well beyond human to be able to run around with it at all. One would expect you're also strong enough to be an acrobat with it. If you want to show off just how much of a beefy boy you are, under your normal exterior, the Giant Crusher is the bonk stick for you. But I don't want that. Now, granted, it's partially because I don't like how ungodly slow the attacks for colossal weapons are, but that's not all. At first glance, especially if you haven't read the item description, there's nothing obviously absurd about the brick hammer. It's a brick on a stick. Yet another bonk stick for the bonk-obsessed strength purists. It's only if you read the description, or think about it for a bit, and really take in what you're looking at, that you realize something is out of the ordinary. A normal person shouldn't be able to do somersaulting slam attacks with a brick that big. Hell, they shouldn't be able to swing a brick that large around at all. This ain't no modern cinder block. This is a big solid block of pure stone. The weight would be absurd. Shoving it into a wall is one thing, but to swing it around like a mace? No, that should be impossible. Yet here you are, doing it. Wielding the brick hammer is like having a hidden power level. You are much more than what you seem, but it's not immediately obvious. You appear more ordinary than you really are. And I like that fantasy. I like the idea I'm controlling this absurdly powerful character that you only realize is such once he starts jumping around like a chimp, swinging, of all things, a fucking brick at people. The apotheosis of this fantasy, I think, manifested when I killed Melania with this character. I wish I'd recorded it. I only have screenshots from the very end. Melania is the boss I've had the second most trouble with after New Radon. I have beat her thrice. The first time took me 6 hours, and the second took me 4. But this time, 5 minutes over 3 attempts. Might have been only 1 or 2 had I remembered Bloodhound's step existed, or had I gone into the first attempt with 1 or 2 more health flasks. Stance breaks are Melania's Achilles heel, and Great Hammers are arguably the best stance breakers in the game due to their sweet spot between attack speed and stance damage. Combined with the brick hammer having the highest damage of any Great Hammer on a heavy infusion, plus there being multiple buffs I stacked onto it, Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Exalted Flesh, it absolutely melted Melania's health bar, to a degree I wasn't even mentally prepared for. I went in there expecting for it to actually take longer than my previous attempt, which had the advantage of being a Bolt of Grandsax build that could safely pelt her with lightning bolts at range while she slowly walked towards me. I expected to get eviscerated by closing in with her, and for there to be a long learning process now that I was finally being forced to tangle with her face to face, as I fully admit, I'm not that great at Souls combat, and regularly embarrassed myself fighting much easier enemies on this strength character precisely because I was being forced to engage everything in a melee brawl. But the sheer damage and stance damage I was outputting here just shut down Melania entirely. My clumsy ass got her down to 20% HP in Phase 2 on my first try, before I ran out of flasks and died. On my second attempt, I died about 15 seconds into the fight when she popped Waterfowl right in front of me. Still hate that move, you can't convince me otherwise. The third attempt was just a crushing whirlwind of Lion's Claw slams, where I stance broke her over and over again. She got so few hits in that I finished the fight with 6 health flasks left. It looked and felt amazing. The Goddess of Rot, the Blade of Mikola, annihilated in like a minute by some guy with a brick. I absolutely adore the dissonance between my toon looking like some impoverished simpleton wearing beat-up armor and swinging around a fucking brick, and him being able to easily smash the most skilled and dangerous demigod, one who swiftly flows and darts around the arena making swift and flashy katana swings to death with said brick in almost no time. Something even Radon could not accomplish. What I've experienced here, what I'm attached to, is not role-playing in the traditional sense. I'm not navigating an ethical quandary or going down a narrative decision tree, nor is it directly tied to mechanical role-playing, since player stats in Elden Ring largely just make attack and defense numbers go up, rather than defining anything about what your character can do beyond stat requirements for using things. It is a sort of role playing, but one that is tied up entirely in an expression of a power fantasy, the look and feel of what my character is and how they fight. You might call it aesthetic role playing, although that might imply it to be a little more surface level than it is, as evidenced by how I feel about the Brickhammer's hidden power. But the point is the same. I've made a character that fights in a particular way and looks a particular way while doing it. It's a self constructed spectacle based on what I want to see my character do and how I want them to look. I have only here laid out one example based on one weapon and what that weapon means to me. I mentioned the large club earlier. I'm not a fan of it myself, but putting on the champion set and running around bonking everything with it like the ultimate caveman may well sound like a grand old time to somebody else. That's another example of a kind of power fantasy the game lets you embody. You could run through the whole game in samurai armor with a katana with an Asian looking character to feel like a samurai. You could play a wizard who refuses to use armor or any physical weapon just to show off how good he is at magic. You hopefully get the idea. The same kind of thought I put into the Brickhammer and the kind of fantasy it enables you to present on screen can be concocted for any combination of weapons, spells, abilities, and clothing in the game. And this is why the sheer quantity of items in the game is so important. If you've ever watched weapon tier lists or breakdowns on YouTube, you've probably seen how many weapons and items in the game are mechanically inferior or redundant to others. But it's still important that they exist because it's not just about what the weapons can do, it's about what the weapon is, how it looks, and how that fits into your overall character. The battle hammer may be inferior to my brick hammer, statistically, but since the item description says it's for gladiatorial combat, it may be the perfect choice if you want to look and fight like an in-universe gladiator. The Dragon Great Claw may not be that great statistically, but maybe you want to look and feel like a dragon hunter, so using a dragon bone as a weapon is an important part of that aesthetic for you. The fire infusion is almost always inferior statistically to using the heavy infusion due to how enemy defenses work. But maybe having that inner fire that infuses your strikes and hits your opponents with flames is important. Maybe you made a northerner looking character, one that the game itself says may be a distant descendant of the giants, and you want them to look and feel like they've tapped into that ancient power. The gravity bolt functions identically to lightning bolt, but it doesn't feel the same, does it? Both are top hit cast attacks. Mechanically, outside of the exact damage numbers, they are the same. But because they look different, because they come from different catalysts and diegetically draw from different power sources, they don't end up feeling the same, and they fit completely different character styles. I don't think this is a truly new concept. Many Souls players long ago embraced this sort of aesthetic priority when it comes to player clothing and armor, fashion Souls. Granted, this may have been because player survivability was so low that the impact of better armor wasn't perceptible enough for people to care about it more than how they looked, but the mentality has nevertheless stuck around even in Elden Ring, where what you wear really does matter, as the heaviest armor makes you considerably harder to kill and harder to stance break. Yet that doesn't stop people from wearing statistically inferior armor because they think it looks cool. What I'm doing here is extending the concept to the entire game. Rather than only caring about how my character's armor looks, I care about how everything they do looks. I care about what it is. I care about whatever lore blurb inspired headcanon I can attach to it. And the sheer quantity of equipable items and abilities means there is an absolute legion of possible characters you can create with them, which is why that sheer quantity is actually not, as some might suggest, a bad thing. The fact that so many of them are suboptimal or redundant is not important. That's not to say all of them are balanced properly. They're not. Only that they don't all need to have a unique niche all to themselves. So long as they all look different, so long as they can each fit into a different character build based on a particular aesthetic, a particular power fantasy, then every one of them should remain in the game in order to offer as many options to as many people as possible. It's a level of fantasy embodiment that is really only comparable to something like Skyrim, and Skyrim's capacity in this regard is significantly less because it has a much, much smaller roster of visually unique items. Elden Ring currently stands atop the pile in this regard. If you want to look and feel like a high fantasy badass, and you have a particular kind of badass in mind that you want to embody, chances are there's some combination of items and abilities in Elden Ring that will let you do it. I've said in the past, I come to Elden Ring for non traditional reasons, i.e., I'm not here to be forced to perfectly memorize enemy attack patterns to defeat bosses through rigorous trial and error, as many FromSoft junkies are. I am here for exactly what I've laid out here, a power fantasy, because despite having a reputation for being crushingly difficult and humbling the player, a reputation that the DLC sadly played right into, much to my chagrin, it's become quite evident to me that player expression and player empowerment are actually a massive part of this game if you actually embrace it instead of intentionally gimping yourself in order to indulge in the same masochistic ritual you practiced in Dark Souls, and I fucking love it. It makes getting bored of this game extremely difficult, for me anyway. There is always some other way I could build a character to dab on my enemies with. I've only scratched the surface, despite the hundreds of hours I've put in already. It's this variety of fantasy fulfillment, combined with the length of the game, that allows me to keep playing it regularly, even 3 years later. There's no other game like it, so thank fuck it's as good as it is. There's many things I've wagged my finger at this game for, but none of them end up being deal breakers outside the DLC, as I said long ago. Because the player expression is so off the charts in this game, I cannot stay mad at it. Elden Ring makes me feel fucking cool as shit in almost as many ways as I can concoct, and that, more than anything, is why I love it.